And let's share the source sheet. All right, there we go. Okay, so Parshat Lech Lecha is really the introduction of Avraham. We encounter him very briefly at the end of Parshat Noach, but with Parshat Lech Lecha, he is fully on the scene for the next several weeks. And of course, all the well-known stories and trials. Tonight, I wanted to focus on one of the perhaps lesser known stories, although I think we looked at a different aspect of this story last year. Um, and we're going to look at it. I wanted to um, bring to your awareness two really important fundamental, uh, more contemporary commentaries on this. And so I thought this was an interesting way to approach it. Um, the episode that we're talking about is the capture of Lot. So you remember that there are these five kings and four kings, and they go to war against each other, and it's very unclear why or what's happening or what the point of this whole thing is. Um, but we read in the middle of this in verse 11. Let me just get the English up for you. And where did I put my source sheet? Here it is. Okay, so in verse 11,
Good.
Vaikhu et kol rechush Stom v'Amora ve'kol ochlam vayilechu. They took all the property of Stom and Amora and all of their food, and they went. Vaikhu et Lot ve'et rechushav ben achi Avram vayelchu v'hu yoshev b'Stom. And they took Lot and his property, the nephew of Avram, and they went, and he was living in Stom. Vayavo hapalit vayagid la'Avram ha'ivri u'shochin be'elonei mamre ha'emori achi eshkol v'achi aner v'hem ba'alei brit Avram. And this palit, which is translated here as a fugitive, Rashi tells us the midrashic tradition that this news bearer is in fact Og Melech Habashan, and that he had his eyes on Sarah. So he thought that if he tells Avram that Lot was taken captive, Avram will run off to war. Avram doesn't stand any chance against these mighty kings. Avram will die in battle, and then Og would be able to marry Sarah. Right. So that's a very common theme actually throughout these stories is the threat of Sarah being taken by another man. So anyway, so that's here. But this refuge comes and he tells to Avram, and it's interesting that this is the source where Avram is called Avram HaIvri, the Hebrew. I've spoken many times in Shul about this description of Avram, and of course we're called Ivrim, Hebrews also. The very famous midrash that says the significance of that term is that hu me'ever echad, v'kol ha'olam me'ever sheni. That right, Avram was on one side and the entire world was on the other side. And so to be a Hebrew is to be someone who is who's a counterculturist. So Avram, so this refugee comes and he tells Avram the Ivri, Avram was living in Elonei Mamre, which is in the property of these two people who were covenantal partners with him. Vayishma Avram ki nishba achiv, vayarek et chanichav yelidei beito, shmona asar ushlosh me'ot vayirdof ad dan. And Avram heard that his brother had been taken, and he gathers his charges, his kinsmen, his soldiers, maybe unclear exactly what this word chanichav means, but he gathers them, 318 of them, and they chase until dawn. Vayichalek alehem laila hu va'avada vayakim v'yerafim ad chorva asher mismol ad Damasek, and he comes upon the captors at nighttime, and he attacks them, He chases them all the way to Small Damesek, or Tehova, which is north of Damascus. He chases them a very far way. וישב את כל רכוש וגם את לוט אחיו ורכושו השיב וגם את הנשים ואת העם. He returns all of the property, and he returns Lot and his property, and the women and all the other captives. Okay, so Avram hears that his nephew Lot has been taken captive. He gathers whatever troops, whatever soldiers might be capable of, might be around to join him. He, against the odds, defeats these kings or the people that took Lot captive and restores everything. That's the basic story. Right? So one question is, why do we care about this story? What's the significance of it? But the more precise question that I wanted to focus on tonight is why does Abraham feel compelled to rescue Lot? That's the question. Okay, so it might sound like a little bit of a silly question. Why does Abraham feel compelled to rescue Lot? I'll open it up. Any initial thoughts on why he feels compelled?
It's his nephew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one good
So
reason.
Yeah.
familial attachment?
Yeah, familial attachment, that certainly would be a legitimate reason. Um, right? We've unfortunately over these past 2 years become very familiar with the notion of pidyon shvuyim, of redeeming captives. And you're supposed to do anything in your power, in your ability to redeem captives. So it seems like a little bit of a silly question, perhaps. Why does Avram feel compelled? Can anyone think
Hmm.
of help me out here? Why is this an okay question to ask?
Well, I think
Well,
it's
it's
a
a show,
fascinating question,
it's a
really.
showing of his power, of Abraham's power, because
Okay, so certainly that might be why this story is included, to show us Abraham's power, his strength, his emergence in the international, as it were, political community. Yes, but that doesn't mean that he was justified in doing so. So, Anne, you think
The
it's a
other,
good? What were you saying, Anne?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, the other thing is, though, that the last time they had a conversation, it wasn't really, it was kind of standoffish, you know?
Right.
So
So right. So
it
Lot
isn't
had
as if,
separated from Abraham, right? And it's seems that that was what Abraham wanted. There was quarreling between their shepherds. They weren't getting along. They were too wealthy to live close to each other. Um, and so Lot had separated from Abraham, and it wasn't necessarily, or on the surface, it seems to not be necessarily on the best of terms. So, right, maybe like Charles saying, well, even though they had this dispute, the family, the blood runs thick, right? The family ties are very strong, and so Abraham still felt a connection and a need to intervene and do whatever he could to save his nephew. So, it's jumping a little bit out of order, and I think it was on Shavuos where we spoke about this in sort of different terms, but I think one Shavuos, I think 2 years ago, um, I gave a shiur on whether one is obligated to endanger oneself in order to save
right.
others, right? And we spoke about that primarily in the context of a doctor. Is a doctor obligated to put him or herself in danger, right? I think I don't remember if the original context we spoke about this was in COVID, right? Does a doctor have to treat a COVID patient, or would that be considered no because the doctor is in danger of contracting COVID themselves, and that wouldn't that would be an unfair burden to put on someone. Right? We could ask the same question in the context of a soldier in battle. Does a soldier in battle have to endanger themselves in order to rescue a hostage in order to stop the enemy, or do they just have to focus on preserving their life? So that's the question's been asked also. Um, there's a movement within the halachic community to encourage kidney donation, right? So that's a very
Mm-hmm.
important question.
Mm-hmm.
Is one halachically allowed to endanger themselves, right? To give up a working organ isn't so simple. We have an imperative to preserve our own life. So can you put yourself, undergo the dangers of surgery and whatever risks are associated with only having only one kidney instead of two? We can think of other organs also. Right, is that something which is a fair ask? So that was the context that we looked at this question originally. Was Abraham allowed to endanger himself in order to save Lot? Okay, that's the question, and that's the premise for the question.
Well,
Okay,
he didn't have the halacha at that
correct.
point.
He didn't have the halacha at that point, so that's a really interesting question. Is there certainly is an assumption in many traditional sources that the avot that the patriarchs knew the Torah, knew what the halacha is, and we sort of hold them to halachic standards, except when we don't. So, right, the best example of that is Yaakov. Yaakov married two sisters. Halacha clearly does not allow that. So some say that, well, this happened before the Torah was given, so he wasn't bound by halacha, and others try to find halachic justifications for it. And the best I think that I've seen is that they say, well, Yaakov had prophecy, and he knew that the 12 tribes of Israel would be built from his marrying these two sisters, and so therefore he was exempt from the halachic requirements, or he had special circumstances. Um, but yeah, so that's an interesting question. Is it fair? Is it a fair question to hold them accountable to the terms that halacha dictates or not? That's a really interesting question. I think we explored that one Parsha Shir also several years back. Did they know of the Torah? Did they keep the Torah? So for the purpose of tonight, we're going to assume that they at least knew of it, or even if they didn't know of it, we can at least apply the Torah's principles to examine their behavior. Okay?
Sure.
Well,
Okay.
but the word Chanikat or something like that was in the
Chanichav. Yeah.
yeah. Some people translate that as his students,
Right. Like lechanech is to educate.
Yes,
So
exactly.
his
Yeah. Hmm.
charges might be the best translation for that. But it doesn't really fit with the military context, so that's why it's a little bit hard to translate.
Right, but
Okay.
it does fit with the Torah context. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So to start to answer this, I wanted to just paint the picture a little bit deeper.
Rabbi,
Um,
Stewart,
yes.
can I
Yes.
what Anne just asked allows me to ask a question, which is, it always surprises me a little bit when Abraham gets up and takes up weapons and goes and fights, because
Yeah.
it's not what we see him doing most of the time.
Hmm.
But it's not something that you could just do on a dime, right? He must be practiced at defending himself in that way, and the people who are with him. So
One would think so.
so
Um,
so I wonder if there's a sense in which his students are also, they're also warriors, because that's
yeah.
where you have to be if you live in the kind of society that they were living in, that you have to be able to defend yourself when you're going
Right. And we
from place
could
to place.
give perhaps a to be a student of Avraham means that one has to be versed not only in the ways of Torah, or that part of what to be a student of Avraham is to be fully engaged and involved in the world in all aspects. Right. I was going to say we could maybe use that in a contemporary Israel society with the ongoing debate
Mhm.
about Haredi involvements. But just or more broadly speaking, that that it require, to be a Jew, to be an educated Jew means to be a fully engaged Jew, a fully engaged citizen in the world. Um, I mean, the other side of that, Beatrice, is we've all heard stories of the mother who lifts a car off their child, right, or whatever, without any training, just in the moment. If you get so caught up and distraught by seeing someone you love in danger, that sometimes even without the training, you're able to do amazing things. And
Right.
and certainly some take Abraham's involvement that way. But I tend to side with your take on it also, that no, he clearly had the training and he had some expertise, if not experience already. Um, okay, so in the chapter that immediately follows this, the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant of the parts, we read Achar hadvarim ha'ele hayadvar Hashem el Avram b'machazel lemor al tira Avram anochi magen lach skarcha harbe meod. After these things, after this war and the rescue of Lot, God appears to Avram in a vision, saying, "Do not fear, Avram. I will protect you. Your reward is great." So Rashi wants to know what's Avraham afraid of? Why does God have to
Mhm.
give him this assurance that he shouldn't be afraid? So Rashi tells us, Achar hadvarim ha'ele, Achar shenasa lo nes zeh, Shaharag Hamilachim, after this miracle happened where he was able to kill the kings, Vahaya doeg ve'omer Shema kibalti sachar al kol tzidkotai. And he's afraid that maybe he's used up all his mitzvah points. V'kach amar lo hamakom al tira Avram anochi magen lach. Therefore God told him, don't worry, I will protect you from min ha'onesh, from the punishment. Shlo te'anesh al kol otan nefashot sharagta. You will not be punished for those people that you killed. Umashata doeg al kibul skarcha harbe mod. And if you're worried that you've used up all your reward, all your mitzvah points, as it were, don't worry, your reward is great. The Medrash, in source number 4, the next source, spells out a little bit more the fear that Avram had about having killed these, maybe some of the people that he killed weren't deserving of being killed. And again, I think I spoke about this also. And again, it's hard to keep track all the various shiurim and divrei Torah we've given the past several years over ethics of war. But this is one of the sources that's quoted about innocent bystanders and casualties of war. If Avram was so worried that he might have killed innocent bystanders, that might be a good source against sort of bombing and putting civilians in harm's way, even if they are intermixed with the enemy and with terrorists. So the Medrash gets into that a little bit. I think we're going to not delve into this inside, but it's here for you. And I'm happy to share also the source sheet that we from that original share about are you allowed to endanger or allowed or required to endanger yourself in order to save others. I'm happy to share that as
Very
well.
good. Thank you.
When the Israelis treated medically, say the Hamas, and
Yeah,
that is actually endangering Israel at the same time.
correct. Correct. Right. I mean, the most harrowing story of this most recent war is that Sinwar was in Israeli jail and he had a tooth infection. And the prisoners get dental treatments, and the dentist saw that his tooth was badly infected, to the point that it could have become fatal, and they treated him. And then he was eventually released in the Gilad Shalit deal, and then he went on and masterminded October 7th. So yes, treating the enemy can be very dangerous, and can put yourself in danger. Okay, so if Moshe Feinstein asks the following question, and again, I'm going to go a little bit quickly, not give this all the time that it deserves. But basically, he's wrestling with the question about, again, does a doctor, do you have to endanger yourself to save others? So he says that we have a mitzvah of lo tamod al dam re'echa, do not stand by the blood of your neighbor. Um, but he says that this is like hu b'din kol alavin. This is like any other mitzvah that we have. Ein lechayev la'adam likanes b'safek sakana lahatzalach havero mivadai sakana. There is no obligation of a person to put themselves, even in a potentially dangerous situation, to save someone who is um, in a definitely dangerous situation. Zahali hinatzel may avirat kol halavin vaday lo rak she'enu tzarich ela shagam asur lachnis atzmo lesafik sakana. Right? Not only is there no obligation to endanger yourself, but it's even forbidden to put yourself in endanger yourself. And again, lots of interesting questions about this. How far does that extend? You could make an argument that if halacha doesn't allow you to endanger yourself, you should never get in a car because driving on the roads is very dangerous. You should never get in a plane, although statistically it's safer than driving in a car. That's also potentially dangerous. You should never exercise because bad things could happen to you when you exercise, right? So what's the and no one believes that, right? You have to live with a certain amount of risk in your life, and the question is what is an appropriate and halachically sanctioned level of risk, right? And he says, right now, not only are you not allowed to endanger yourself, right? We know that Shabbos after fuas misafik sakana, and we know that we violate Shabbos to save someone even if they're in a potentially dangerous situation. Okay, and yeah, so certainly you're not allowed to endanger yourself in any of these situations. V'im kain, ein l'chayvo lahachnis atzmo l'safik sakana gam bishvil atil nefesh chavero. Therefore, there's no way that halacha could obligate someone to enter a dangerous situation, even to save someone else. Aval mistaber sheyeh chiluk lav delo ta'amod al dam re'echa mishar lavin. But he says there is an important distinction between this mitzvah of lo tamod al dam re'echa, don't stand by the blood of your neighbor, from all other commandments. The bishar alavin ha'asr lachnis atzmo l'safik sakana kadesh lo yavor alav kitlael. When with any other mitzvah, you're not allowed to endanger yourself because of the mitzvah, except of course for the cardinal three sins, which you have to give your life for. But for any others, you're not allowed to. Okay. Dot dot dot. Aval im eno ela lahanat atzmo asor lachmir v'nikra chovel ba'atzmo. Right? If it's only right, if there's no other halachic justification, you're not allowed to endanger yourself. And if you're violating Shabbos and it's not in order to save someone, then you're also in a bad spot. And if you do endanger yourself when it's not halachically justifiable, so that's considered a form of mitchayev binafsho. You're liable for the consequences, and he says it may even be akin to a suicidal act. Aval lahatzil nefesh chavero, but in order to save someone else's life, af shegamkin hurak be'isur lav. Even though there is this lav of lo tamod al dam re'echa, there is this which normally has limits that you don't endanger yourself for it. Yemutar lahachnis atzmo b'safek me'achar da'al kol panim yutzal nefesh mi'Yisrael. In this case, you're allowed to endanger yourself. You're not going to be held accountable or liable if you do endanger yourself, because in the end of the day, hopefully you will have saved someone else's life. So there are situations where you're allowed to endanger yourself, even though halacha would never mandate or require it. Okay, that's the gist of Rav Moshe Feinstein. So you're allowed to, but you're certainly not obligated to. I wasn't sure where to put this Ramban, so I put the Ramban here. The Ramban says basically that without getting into the halachic issue, and we guess if we're applying this principle seriously, we would have to find the halachic justification for what the Ramban says. The Ramban basically says that Avraham was responsible for Lot. Right? What happened to Lot? Lot's father, Avram's brother, died. We're told, right, by the Medrash that he died because he also jumped into the furnace when Avram was put to the test of the furnace. So he died al Kiddush Hashem. He died sanctifying God's name. And so therefore Avram had a responsibility to him. And the Ramban says that had Lot's father, Avram's brother Haran, not been killed, then Lot would have been living a happy life in Haran. He never would have gone on this journey with Avraham. Since he came to Eretz Canaan, eventually, whatever circumstances led him to settle in Sodom, it was all because Avram was responsible for him. Since Avram had responsibility for him, Avram felt compelled to save him. That's what the Ramban says. Again, he doesn't give the halachic justification, but he does say what was at least Avram's mindset. Right, and so that I mean we've seen this also. It's a little bit difficult to say, but there were some families of the hostages who were being held for 2 years who said they didn't want to see a deal to let their children free because they thought it was not. Some of them I think used halachic terminology. Some of them used political calculations. That it was not a it was too heavy a price to pay. And other parents, other family members were very passionate that we have to do everything possible to save our kid, and we don't care about the political issues. We don't care about the halachic issues at play. We have to save them. And so that's at least the mindset according to Ramban of what Avraham had. Any questions on this?
It certainly provides him with another clear motive. That's for sure.
Yes. Okay, the next source, and this is really the heart of what I wanted to get to, is from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. I just looked up his entry on Wikipedia, and Robert, maybe you're a local Baltimore expert. Rabbi Kamenetsky actually lived his last years in Baltimore. His daughter married Rabbi Diskind, I believe, and I'm assuming that Rabbi Kamenetsky came to live with his daughter at some point.
I would have to check with Rena to know for sure about that. She knows better.
Okay. So that's your homework then. But anyway, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, one of the leaders of the last generation of American Jewry, was the Rosh Yeshiva Torah Das for many years. Okay, so he asks the halachic question that I posed at the beginning of the shir. I translated this in English as best as I could. And if I need to scroll down more, someone let me know. If Avram had asked the halachic shaila if he was obligated to go and save Lot, certainly the answer would be no, that he was exempt, that he didn't have to, or maybe even that he shouldn't. Because a person is never obligated to endanger themselves in order to save someone else. Ella, so he says the reason that Avram did this is because the patriarchs were called Yisharim, which are translated as upright. That means that their behavior, Arthur, to your question, they did not act based on halacha and the laws of the Torah, but they act on pure rational ethics. Elokim asa et adam yashar. God created humans upright. Al pi hayosher haya mutal al Avram lishtadel atzil et Lot. And based on basic laws, I don't know if it's basic morality, basic ethics, or this if uprightedness is a higher standard, Whatever this standard is, Avraham had an obligation to endeavor to save Lot. Ki Avram hirgish et atzmo ke'achra'ai lishlomo shel Lot. Avram felt that he was responsible for Lot's well-being. Mikevan Sharan Aviv made Bekivshan Ha'ish, very similar to the Ramban, since his father Haran was killed in the furnace. Yishum Shamar Shumamin Belokei Avram, since he declared his belief in the God of Avraham. Lachain al Pia Yosher, or Menschlichkeit, Uchrach Avraham lahariket chanichav lirdof achar melachim. Based on this standard of Yosher, uprightness, or Menschlichkeit, Avram was obligated or compelled to enlist his students, his charges, and to chase after the kings. Ube'emet, kol chayei ha'avot shayu kodem zman Torah, hayu munhagim al pi yosher. In truth, he says, the entire life, all the lives of our patriarchs who lived before the giving of the Torah were based on this principle of yosher. V'zehu bi'ur mamar chazal, Derech Eretz Kadma Torah, right? We quote this often. The idea that Derech Eretz, the way of the world, or basic ethics, precedes the Torah. V'hainu shavot hitnahagu al pi derech eretz vayosher od kodem shenitna Torah. That means that the avot, the patriarchs, behaved based on derech eretz and uprightness even before the Torah was given. V'nireh. Everyone still with me?
Yeah.
V'nireh. Shezeu pshuto shel mikra lahalan. So he quotes a pasuk from Sefer Shmot. Ve'etna lecha et luchot ha'even ha'torah v'hamitzvah. When God tells Moshe, I'm going to give you the tablets with the Torah and the mitzvot. The bishlama mitzvah hainu mitzvot shnitztavu bahen. Says, I understand why God uses the term mitzvah. But to say Torah and mitzvah seems to be redundant. Why would God tell Moshe, I'm giving you Torah and mitzvah? Mitzvah is Torah. Aval mazeh haTorah. So what does the phrase Torah add? Nireh shakavana hi lisipurei haTorah shel ha'avot shenichtavu b'Torah kodem hamitzvot. So he says Torah must refer to the life stories of the avot, of the patriarchs, which were written before the mitzvot were given. V'hainu sharei lashon Torah hu milashon hora'ah. In the word Torah, the very word, the etymology is from the word hora'ah, instruction. Klomar mora derech. It's a sort of a guidebook. Ki sipurim elu morim la'adam ich lichyot afilu b'li tzivui Hashem yitbarach. These stories teach a person how to live even without God's commandments. Moshe Mar David v'kinato al Shaul. Okay, so this is we see other examples of this idea, right? And it gets into a debate which fascinates me, which I speak about very frequently, about the question of, is there a moral ethic, a moral imperative independent of the Torah, or is the Torah our only source of ethics and morality? So this seems to be very strongly saying that no, there is a sense of ethics and morality that exists independent of the Torah, outside of the Torah, and that's what the Avot teach us. V'hinei Rashi. Reish Breshi Tiksha Madura. So he quotes the very famous first Rashi at the beginning of the Torah, where Rashi asks the question, if the Torah is supposed to be a book of laws, then the Torah should have begun from HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, from the first mitzvah that we were given as a people, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, of setting the calendar. Why does the Torah begin with the story of creation? So Rashi says there, Koach Masav Higid La'amo, that God told us about the greatness of His creation, that He created the world, and therefore God can give the land to whomever He chooses to give the land. He can give it to the Jewish people. He can take it away from us. He can give it back to us. And if ever people will come and make a claim that we incorrectly and inappropriately took the land from them, we can point to the Torah and say, no, God is the ultimate owner of all the land, and God has determined that we have the right to live here. So now Rav Kamenetsky asks, okay, that's a very nice Rashi, very important. Unfortunately, a Rashi that is still very relevant and claims that we have to continue to answer against our enemies. But he says, okay, so that explains the first 3 chapters of the Torah. So Torah could have told us about the story of creation and then gone to HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem and then go to the first mitzvah we were given. Why does the Torah include all the stories from the end of creation until he accepts that, okay, maybe for Noah, maybe it makes sense through Noah, through the flood, to tell us the story of humanity. But certainly all the stories of the Parshiot, beginning with Lech Lecha, with Avraham through the end of Sefer Breshit, seem to be superfluous, if this is the reason. Adayin eino muvan, madua hutzracha Torah laharich b'chol zeh. Why does the Torah have to tell us about all of this? Ve'al zeh lichora lo tiretz Rashi klum. He says maybe Rashi wasn't concerned with that question. Rashi gave us a starting point to understand why we have Sefer Breshit, but he didn't answer fully. Aval lefi ma shekatafti nireh shebemet al parshiot elu lo kasher klal. He says based on what I've written, there's really no question whatsoever. Because based on the stories of the Avot, we learn how a person should live based on a life of yosher, of uprightness, and derech eretz, and basic morality. And we can demand this even from non-Jews. Even though they were not given the mitzvot, to live a life of yosher, to live an upright and upstanding life, any person can do if that's what they desire, if that's what they want to do. Any thoughts or reactions to this?
Oh my.
It seems to me that there's a mention of Gentiles in various places too.
Yeah.
And yet the examples that we started with Abraham and with Lot's father had to do with their belief in God. And
Right. So that was the Ramban's approach to it.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But one has to ask also, I mean, to zero in on the so-called ethical dimension leaves out so much of what is there in Bereshit about Avraham. Would one call making 3 altars for Hashem ethical conduct? No. Would one say being given the power of blessing so that if he blesses someone, they will be blessed? Is that an ethical concern? Is a number of times in which Abraham is involved in conversations with Hashem and growing in a relationship with Hashem, is that ethical conduct? I mean, to shrink it down to that kind of a question, I'm sorry, I know it makes me feel as if we're not quite doing full justice to Abraham here.
I hear the question. I mean, so I'll say one thing right now, which is that I think there's certainly an assumption that when we talk about ethics, we're talking about ethical monotheism, and that part of the ethics of an ethical life is a recognition of God. Doesn't mean, again, that certainly doesn't mean that it means that we're out to proselytize and to make converts and to bring everyone to be Jewish, but there certainly is a important component, which is recognition of God and perhaps even necessarily rejection of false gods. And so there is this sort of religious component, I think, to it. Um,
Not in a philosophy department, I could tell you
not
that.
not in a
I've
philosophy
worked
department.
in a
No,
couple
yeah,
of them,
but right, right,
the
and it's a
philosophy and
little bit
religious departments, and you don't get very far with that. I'll tell
yeah.
you.
So then it becomes an interesting question, and then right, so there's really interesting stuff written about this. Right, generally you find it in the context of discussion of the halachic status of Christianity. And does halacha consider Christianity to be idolatrous? Um, and so there's the famous, again, famous if you know of it, but there's the Meiri who says that so long as someone is living a life, an ethical and moral life, um, then even if they are professed Christians, um, it wouldn't. It's not idolatrous. That the idolatry, that the definition of avodah zarah is much more in an ethical realm than it is in a sort of a technical religious realm. Um, so that is one piece of it. That certainly is an important piece of it. I think we might also say that that the the Torah has to tell a compelling story. And so just, if he's saying that the main point, the main goal of including the life stories of the Avot is to give this notion of living a life of Yosher, doesn't mean that that's all the Torah is going to talk about. And
Of course not.
so certainly, if all we got from the life, and it's hard to say all, but if all we got from the life of Abraham was that we have to call out in the name of God and recognize God and build, and this notion of Hakarat Tov and professing the truth, so then maybe it wouldn't be necessary to include the stories because we have halachot that sort of talk about that, and that could have been worked in, you know without giving us the details of his life. But once we are giving the details of his life, so then we can include other details as well. Those are the two um, quick responses I would give to your important question, Anne.
Thank you.
Um,
I was really upset by the expression upright intellect, as if that was enough to explain things by Ralph Kamenetsky. And I was hoping maybe you could fill us in a bit more about what that means. I mean, is that a quote from the Rambam or something like that, which actually means a whole lot of other things too? Because the whole of Chassidus sees Avraham as someone who is the exemplification of a very strong emotion and attribute of
yeah,
Hashem, which is
yeah,
kindness. And there's the intellect, it plays a role in shaping that kindness so that the kindness isn't it's squandered, so to speak, on certain people, or people are giving not enough kindness or too much kindness and so on. And that's what the balancing of that kind of a thing. That's part of the mind is helping to Bina understanding is helping to balance things out.
yeah.
Um, but
I don't know enough about Rav Kamenetsky and his writing to know if this is a technical intentional phrase and if he uses it elsewhere. So I can't comment on that.
he says menschlichkeit, and
Right.
that isn't, or it's, I don't know if it's spelled in the Yiddish menschlichkeit or something like that.
It is. Yes.
But okay, but that means to be nice to people, to be a real mensch means a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean just something something to do with the intellect. Okay, so that really made me wonder where he was coming from and what's going on here.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough to give a appropriate answer to that question.
Well, the Sefer HaYashar, written by Avraham Abulafia, in the 15th
Yeah,
century
yeah,
now, and it's described as a book on ethical conduct. I've seen it described that way. I haven't read it. I've only read a couple of quotes from it that showed up in Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's history of Hasidus and ideas and so on. There are concepts there. So I know he got himself in trouble with a lot of people with some of the things that he said, but he's fascinating. I mean, there's no question about that. But I
yeah,
haven't read his book. But I thought maybe that there was an influence kind of to say, okay, upright intellect, maybe that's a term that he uses. I was just curious about it.
yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I just wanted to point out source number 8 in Nitziv's Introduction to Sefer Bereshit, which is one of those sort of fundamental texts which I thought it was important to just give some exposure to. The Nitziv, we don't have time to do the entire thing, but the Nitziv notes that Sefer Bereshit is called Sefer Hayashar. So Anne just quoted Sefer Yashar from Rabbi Abulafia. And fun fact, I one summer when Israel was 1 year old, not even, we worked at Camp Yavne and on the chinuch staff there, and I had a camper who was a descendant of Rabbi Abulafia, and she had the same last name. So I will always remember Rabbi Abulafia. Um, anyway, so he notes that Sefer Bereshit is the original Sefer Hayashar. That's one of the names that Chazal give to Sefer Bereshit. And so we're gonna jump in the middle. We're in the English translation, paragraph number 4, which I just highlighted here. And in the Hebrew, there's a Dalid. I can show you where. Hold on. Dalid.
15 lines from the bottom, I think.
Yeah, right there. Okay. So anyway, here's the English. זה היה שבח האבות, שמלבד שהיו צדיקים וחסידים ואוהבי השם באופן היותר אפשר, עוד היו ישרים. It says this is the greatness, the praise of the excellence of the avot, of the patriarchs, in addition to being tzaddikim, to being righteous and pious and lovers of God in the most extreme way possible. They were also yashar. They were also upright. היינו שינהגו עם אומות העולם, אפילו עובדי אלילים מכוערים. That is how they conducted themselves, even with the most deplorable idolaters. מכל מקום היו עמם באהבה וחשו לטובתם באשר היה קודם הבריאה. Right? Nonetheless, they acted even with these most deplorable of people, and they were concerned with their welfare. Uh, As we see that Abraham prayed on behalf of Stom, right? Even though he hated them and he hated their king. Okay. Even though he saw their acts as being deplorable, he still wanted them to live and to survive. Okay, we can skip this a little bit. So he quotes a medrash that says that this is the significance of the name that Hashem gives to Abraham, Av Hamon Goyim, the father of many nations. Af agav she'ein haben holech b'mei sharim mikol makom shocher shlomo v'tuvo. Right? Even if one has a child that doesn't follow in their righteous path, nonetheless, you're still very concerned for the welfare and the well-being of that child. V'chein hutzak, okay. And also with Avram and Lot, v'chein ra'inu kama Noach haya Yitzchak avinu lipayis mi sonav. We see this with Yitzchak also. We learned a lot from the Avot when it comes to Derech Eretz, Masha Shayach L'kim Ha'olam HaMiyuchad, L'zeh HaSefer Su Sefer HaBriah. right? What is required in order to sustain the world, and that's what we find in this first book of the Torah of Breshit. Mishum hachi nikra kamo kain Sefer Hayashar, and that's why it's called Sefer Hayashar, because it teaches us about how to be yashar. Al Maaseh Avot v'zeh haprat, right? About the acts of the patriarchs in this detail. Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so again, this Netziv is a fundamental, important source. I encourage, and maybe we'll find another occasion to look at it more closely, but I certainly encourage everyone to look at it in its fullness and to spend some time with it. But he's making the similar point that that what we're learning, what we're meant to learn from the Avot, not to take away from their belief in God, from their um, professing and calling out in God's name and all the wonderful things that they do and the lessons that they taught us. But among the things that we have to learn from them is how to be yashars, how to be upright and straight and ethical and moral. Um, and that's why he says that's one of the fundamental points of Sefer Breshit as well. Even though Rabbi Kamenetsky doesn't quote the Netziv, it seems fairly obvious that he is building off the same idea of the Netziv, gives his own little twist to it, but that's the fundamental. So again, we started the shir by asking on what basis does Avraham save Lot, and we noted that halachically there seems to be little basis and little justification for what he did. But nonetheless, we're shown that Avraham is acting, as we would say, lifni mishurat hadin, beyond the letter of the law. He's not acting on with halachic considerations. And again, we have the important source we saw from Moshe Feinstein that one is permitted to endanger yourself to save someone else. So Avraham wasn't acting halachically problematic, but he was acting in a way that was beyond halacha in order to teach us the importance of what it means to be an upright and upstanding person. Again, there's a lot of important details that have to be asked and fleshed out in all the unique situations in which this question may arise. For better or we've experienced some of those issues very strongly these past 2 years and are continuing to experience it with the question about to what extent we need to go to return the remains of the hostages who were killed, but certainly as long as there were living hostages, right? What is the justification for going to war? There's and this is a little bit simplistic because halacha certainly recognizes that there is a need for there to be army and soldiers in war, and that soldiers perhaps are a different consideration. And you sign up or what or drafted, but once the uniform is on, you can't say that I'm not allowed. I can't endanger myself because halacha doesn't allow it. There's other factors as well. The same may hold true for a doctor, that if one has the training and the expertise to heal someone, that they can't hold that back, right? We can certainly say that about someone who goes through the training, right? Search and rescue, a firefighter, all sorts of really dangerous jobs and professions that we are exposed to and benefit from, either personally or certainly as a community and as a society. But it's an interesting question to consider. I wanted to give us some insight into this important question about and this approach of the Netziv and of Kamenetsky and others that see the overarching message of Sefer Breshit as being a meta halachic or beyond halachic message about this notion of yashar, living upright and um, uh, morally excellent, moral exemplary moral lives. Okay, final questions or thoughts?
Is there Is this the same notion that would be in the name Yeshurun
It's the
also?
same. Yes, that is where the name Yeshurun comes from.
Yeah, and that is to be our name in the days of
Yes,
Mashiach,
right.
right?
And I mean that's
Not
The
Yisrael,
name
but
Israel also,
Yeshurun.
but the name Israel has Yashar in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when
Mm-hmm.
he points out that the name Yaakov, Akev, Kov is bent, and Yashar, right, is straight. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
this comes up many places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A
Oh,
little bit of sorry, Anne, you weren't finished.
yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I was just thinking this is quite a set of questions, isn't it? That's very good.
Yes. Go ahead, Beatrice.
Um, I was having the thought that sometimes in the name of belief in God, people do things that one might not consider ethical.
Yeah.
And the idea that the two have to go hand in hand, like if Torah and that the Avot are teaching us to how to lead an ethical life, as well as belief in God, the two have to go hand in hand. You can't separate them.
Yes. Yes. That's a very important point. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. I wish everyone a good night. Are there any baseball fans on the Zoom? Did anyone see last night's game?
No.
No,
I heard about it.
yeah, I gave up after the 13th inning. It was
So the longest baseball game ever?
not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
longest baseball game, the longest World Series game, for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was quite incredible. All right, I will wish everyone a good
Okay,
night, a good rest of the week, and see
love
you
to Yis,
hopefully.
love to Yisrael
Thank you. Thank you.
and
Amen.
good Shabbos and everything.
Yes. All right. Have a good rest of the week. Hope we'll see everyone in Shul on Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.